Hi, I'm Jeremy. Welcome to Livewire Review. Today we're doing something a little bit different. I'm going to start interviewing industry leaders, and today I'm with Adam Bourgeois, the owner of the Bourgeois Auto Group. Hey Adam, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your business?
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever been called an industry leader, but I'll take it. So I'm here from the Bourgeois Auto Group, family-run business. I'm a third generation, and we've been doing this for a while. We're almost in our 80th year, so a lot of history behind us. But the industry's changing. It's changing quickly. With all of the transition talk to electric vehicles, it's changing really rapidly, and I don't think anybody's 100% sure where it's going, but we are trying to get ready for it, and we want to innovate and be ahead of the curve.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Almost 80 years in business.
Yeah.
So we're actually going to split this interview up into about 3 different parts. We're going to talk about electrified vehicles today, multiple different technologies like hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and electrics, and maybe even hydrogen, if that makes it into the conversation.
Sure.
And yeah, with that, let's get into it.
Okay.
So to start off with electric vehicles, I'd noticed the last few demo vehicles you've taken is an F-150 Lightning. You want to tell us some of the things you like about it or why you chose that one?
Sure. I mean, the F-150 for me personally, it checks off all of the boxes for my needs.
Yeah.
First, the original reason I drove it is because when I took it for a test drive, I just fell in love with how it drives. I call it my sports car with a lot of utility. It's a bit of it's an electric vehicle thing. Electric vehicles are just generally fun to drive. There's so much acceleration, which is exhilarating. But I also really like how quiet it is. I like that I can listen to my music and it's crystal clear without a lot of road noise. The vehicle's got a ton of technology in it. It's just packed with technology. Ford Blue Cruise is one of the features I love on the vehicle. It took me a while to get used to it, and trust it, but it's pretty darn accurate. You can drive on certain highways that are marked, like the 400 series of highways here in Ontario, hands off, hands free, and like I said, it took me a little while to get used to it, but it is quite nice when I commute, especially between my dealerships. There's cameras on you, so you have to still pay attention to make sure you're watching. The technology is amazing on this vehicle, but I also like just the general use of the vehicle. It sounds funny, but I really like the front. The front space on a pickup truck is quite a bonus. I'm pretty active. I use the truck bed a lot, but I also use the front for items like my golf clubs, which is quite handy. I don't have to worry about my golf clubs clunking around in the back of the truck or in the back seat. So it's a great use of space. So there's multiple reasons, but I really like my Lightning.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Some of my favorite things are the frunk and especially the Pro Power onboard. I love that you can power your house with it. Something that's been missing with even my own 2 EVs is you can't power anything with them. There's no inverter output for my household appliances, but the Lightning can literally charge another vehicle, and I think that's pretty neat.
I've actually talked to some other dealers with some really cool stories, and one dealer, his daughter got married at a country wedding, and they powered the whole event with the Lightning as their generator for the event, or for power. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool. I was told your wife actually drives the Machi as a demo vehicle. In fact, I borrowed it the one day for one of our reviews. It was the Machi GT Performance, and I'll tell you, that thing was a lot of fun. What does your wife like the most about that car?
Well, one of the cool things about my job is we're able to demo a lot of different vehicles. Now that I have the 3 different franchises, we mix it up a bit. She traditionally drives a Lincoln, so for her to go to something not considered a luxury vehicle was a bit of a change for her. But again, when she drove that vehicle, she's like, wow, she didn't realize, it's invigorating to drive, and she actually feels safer driving it because of the smooth acceleration. So the fun to drive part and the instant power at the throttle, The vehicle is heavier than an ICE vehicle, so it handles phenomenal in the snow. It's like
Yeah.
a tank, like we live outside of town and we have some hills to go up that aren't always plowed in the morning, and doesn't have a ton of ground clearance, but it goes right through the snow. We do have snow tires on it,
Yeah.
so that helps, but it's just very stable, and the all-wheel drive system is really good.
Yeah, I found on sheer ice I was driving on the other day, it's amazing how fast those motors can react to it, and it walks out of any situation.
Yeah, yeah.
So what did you do for charging at home? Did you get one EVSE installed, or did you get two? Because you're driving two EVs at the moment.
So I have two chargers. We started out driving the Machi first, and it was actually pretty simple. I just had my electrician run a cable into the garage that is hooked up to, they call it a NEMA plug, which is the same as what you would have on a clothes dryer. And the Machi came with a cord. We plug it in, and it fully charges throughout the night. Now, when we added the second EV to the house, the Lightning at the time came with a no charge level 2 charger, and we ended up installing it originally on the inside in the other garage bay, but we found it actually. I moved it to the outside. It's handier to plug in outside, and I find my wife uses that now. We don't actually use the one in the garage that much because of the handiness of the outdoor charger. So we didn't have to do any upgrades. Mind you, we did have to dial back the Ford level 2 charger will draw, and I'm not great on the technical part of it, but it will draw up to 80 amps, I believe.
Yeah.
Which did flip my breaker in my garage breaker, because I only have an 80 amp panel.
Yeah.
And I did have other items hooked up. So we dialed it back to 50 amps because there's a dial on it, and I've never had an issue with it popping a breaker, and it fully charges either vehicle through the night.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we pretty primarily do all of our charging at home.
Yeah.
And most people think you have to charge it every night. I only plug the vehicles in, a couple times a week, really.
Wow, that's pretty good. I actually found with the F-150 Lightning, if you're doing like contractor use and you're using the whole battery every day, you're going to want to install that 80 amp charger and get that full charge. So if you need panel upgrades, something I'd probably recommend for anybody using it heavy duty is just because it does draw so much. And it shortens that charge time. It brings it down from like 15, 16 hours down in the 8-9 hour range. So it's something you can comfortably do overnight if you're doing those long distance runs.
Yeah.
So if you have a long trip down to Toronto, are you going to grab one of the ICE vehicles off the lot, or are you going to take the EVs downtown and risk the public infrastructure, as I'll say it? Because as we know, we're not allowed to use the Tesla Superchargers just yet.
So it does depend on where we're going in Toronto, but for the most part, I have not had to grab an ICE vehicle to go to Toronto. So, if we want to go to Vaughan and back, it's not a problem at all. We often go down to downtown Toronto. If I do take the Lightning, it has a little longer range. It's a bigger vehicle, but a bigger battery. So I can go there and back to the bottom of the city, even in the dead of winter, and come back without having to charge.
I found the same thing with the longer range EVs. In fact, some of the short range ones just don't cut it here in Canada. They'll make a great second car, but if you're getting one here in Canada, you need the long range version.
Both of my vehicles are the long range editions. We do end up taking the Machi down to the city when we go down more, just because it's a little easier to maneuver in the city, easier to park. I don't have to worry about underground parking as much as I would with a truck. We do tend to we stay down in town, and a lot of the hotels offer a complimentary 3 to 4 hours of charge, and we take advantage of that. So if we're staying overnight, we'll plug it in for a few hours. We don't have to. We do have enough range to get us back, but it's just that little bit of comfort. If the temperature does drop, because it does get a little tight, I find to go to the city and back to the bottom of the city in the dead of winter. In the summer, not an issue.
Yeah, it was the same thing for me last Thursday. I topped up on a level 2 charger, and it got me that extra 3% I would have needed to get back home, and it really does give you that peace of mind.
Yeah.
So looking forward to the future with this different mix of EVs and plug-in hybrids and everything like that, in some aspects they use less repairs. So how is that going to affect the dealership model for you in the future? How is it going to affect the repair side of it?
Well, I mean, it's definitely going to change the complexion of the work in the shop. I mean, right now we have at our Ford store, we have a quick lane, which is quick oil changes. Obviously, you're not going to need that with an EV.
At least you still have tires, right? You can get them back twice a year here in Canada.
Yeah. But the complexion of the work, like you're still going to need tires, suspension, brakes. But there's so much technology in the cars now. And it's not everything that can be fixed with an over-the-air update. So we're seeing, like, because the vehicles are so quiet, you can hear every little squeak or rattle. So NVH is going to be an issue that needs to be corrected by a technician. And again, the technology, like any computer or any phone, needs updates, and not everything can be done over the air. Some of the major updates have to be done at the dealership. So I view our technicians kind of changing to basically computer programmers over time. The parts for the vehicles are more expensive because there's more technology. So maybe some of the items that we lose on the service side may be picked up on the parts side, with all the sensors. We also have a collision shop, so I think right now it's no secret that EVs are more expensive to repair once they've been in a collision.
Yeah, especially since there's fewer of them and the parts are a little harder to get. Like even on my Kona, we had a little tiny bump in the corner on the front bumper, and the bumper took forever to come in because it had to come from Hyundai, and it was a very specific part.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it depends on how quickly this scales up with EVs. That'll kind of determine, the dealership model going forward. But we're all kind of a little bit in a wait and see, not get too far ahead of our skis here, but just be ready for the changes coming.
Luckily on the body shop side, there isn't too much to learn with that because we've already learned all the teething pains of the aluminum F-150 in 2015. So your body shop's already set up to work on aluminum panels, which will definitely help you in the future. And the only consideration when it comes to paint is you just got to lower the oven temperature a little bit. So I think you're well set up on that side of it at least.
The other item I forgot to mention with regards to servicing EVs is, it's pretty easy for people with their gas-powered vehicles to go to any garage, not the dealership.
Yeah.
The manufacturers are trying to pull that in. We may not. Right now, there's a huge defection to a dealership after, say, 3 years when the warranty's up, because anybody can fix a gas-powered vehicle, any local shop. I'm not convinced the local shops are going to do all the upgrades necessary to work on these EVs. There's a lot of capital involved. The dealerships are investing and will continue to invest. So I think we're going to get a higher percentage of repeat customers. Maybe we'll be servicing those vehicles for 10, 12, 15 years versus right now it's, that 3 to 7 year mark where there's quite a fall off. So less service per vehicle, but maybe more customers in the long run is what I could see happening.
You know what, that's a really good point. I think I'm actually going to jump into one of the later topics we were going to cover, but that covers what you said there with the tools that are required. Like you need the battery lift table, and you're right, every manufacturer is a totally different process. Every battery is built differently, every cooling system is built differently. There's switching valves with the heat pumps that are totally different across the brands. I think you've got a really good point that you're going to be able to hold on to those customers longer, and that's not a viewpoint I've heard from most people so far. So that really expands your thinking on how this repair industry is going to go.
Well, I've already made significant investments in infrastructure with regards to chargers and tools. I mean, I think we're up to $500,000 already with very small volumes. And in the Ford world, with the larger chargers required for the Lightning and the infrastructure upgrades required from the utilities, it'll easily double that investment and then some. So we're ready to meet the demand when it's there. We're not going to get ahead of ourselves, but we're going to be ready to accept the demand when it's needed.
True. And I've noticed that you've already started installing different chargers across your dealerships. Again, I think we're going to jump topics here and go straight into the charging infrastructure. You have a level 3 over at the Nissan store, which is soon to be opening up. You got a level 2 here at the Hyundai store. Are there any other level 3 chargers going in?
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, with Ford, it's been quite an evolution in what they require us to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed. I saw it on the whiteboard one day during the meeting that you were planning out the cost analysis for the level 3 chargers and what was required.
So we started at quite a high number. It was well over $1 million with the original requirement. And initially, when the Lightning was first launched, there was a lot of hype around it, and they were selling like hotcakes, and some dealers were actually selling them above MSRP. We never did.
I actually see them everywhere now. So, like, I know sales have stagnated now, but it still looks to be a very popular vehicle. And in my opinion, I think it meets like 80% of use cases for most people.
So, I mean, it's evolving. There's another, second gen coming soon, and I think it'll be, pardon the pun, late years ahead.
Yeah.
But we are definitely making further investments in level 3s within the next year to 18 months. We'll be adding a few more to the group.
Which is amazing to hear, because a lot of the investment in the infrastructure in this area specifically is like 11 years old, and they don't work. The 2 chargers in town don't work. You're going to have the only infrastructure that works, and I think that's pretty cool.
Oh, good to know. I didn't know that.
So what's your opinion on how much of the market is going to be electric vehicles and maybe plug-in hybrids and hybrids in the future? What technologies do you think are going to survive?
That's a tricky question, because there's so many variables. The one variable being what the government is mandating at this particular point in time under the current regime, where we have to be. So that's dictating, what the manufacturers send to Canada. I think their ideology was, if we make it a very high mandate for EVs, then Canada will get more EVs, and that will inherently bring up the sales. Because in the past they were only sending the EVs to the jurisdictions that required them to have that many EVs. But what's happened is now we have more EVs than we actually need. And the reason for that is, I've talked about the benefits of driving an EV, but there are some definite constraints. One being range anxiety,
which is a hard one for people to get over unless they've actually experienced
and
it.
I think a lot of it's unwarranted, because they don't realize you can charge at home. But the bigger one right now for everybody is the cost. The cost is really holding it back from becoming mainstream. And I do think the industry will address that over time. I just don't know how quickly that's going to happen. But I think in the next, what is Canada at now? 5% of EV sales?
Upwards of 13 in some places.
Yeah, it depends on, because in certain provinces they have very lucrative government incentives, like provincial incentives.
British Columbia and Quebec especially. Even in New Brunswick, I believe you get an extra $5,000 on top, if I'm not mistaken.
So the manufacturers are starting to adapt because they realize cost is a factor. So I don't know if you're aware, Machi just did a huge price adjustment as of last week to follow Tesla's adjustment on Model Y. So now all the Machis qualify for all of the provincial and federal incentives. So that's going to help.
That's excellent. That's really good
That's
news.
going to really spur on sales, I think. So hybrids, long way to get to the answer of the question, where do hybrids fit in? To me, they're the perfect transition. Batteries are still slow to ramp up. The cost is still a factor. Hybrids are a way to keep the cost down a little bit, and then it obviously reduces or eliminates the range anxiety concern, and it's a nice way to get people comfortable with part of the technology before they go to a straight EV. So I think hybrids make all the sense in the world.
Yeah, me too. I think it's an excellent transition. Honestly, when it came to people buying their first EV, I think the 2-car household is the perfect place to start. You can always start with one EV, keep your ICE-powered vehicle just so you curb your range anxiety. That's actually how I started out. Bought a plug-in hybrid. I fell in love with the electric drive in it. I kept it for 1 month, and now I've had my Kona EV for about 5 years. So in those first 3 years, we kept the MDX on the side, our ICE vehicle, and we only put 4,000 kilometers on it. So it was time to go. We had to get our second EV because the Kona did everything. So we definitely curbed our range anxiety with that, basically with that, what's the word I'm looking for? The experiment of the electric car. So in your case, what you could probably sell to people would be the Machi, the base model, the one with the lithium iron phosphate battery. I think that'd be a good place for people to start. Get one EV, try it out. You're gonna love it. Like you said, the acceleration is insane. The silence, you actually grow accustomed to it. And the regen braking, I can't go back. I love the features of those cars.
Well, I drove an ICE vehicle recently, and I kept thinking there was something wrong with it because I pressed the accelerator and there was a lag. Like,
Yeah.
what's going on here?
I find that when I test drive customers' cars too, actually. I'm used to the instant power in my car, and sometimes I'm like, uh-oh, I shouldn't have pulled out into traffic here.
Now, I will say, like, I'm all in with my family, with my wife and I. My both of my children aren't driving EVs. They're old enough to drive.
Yeah.
They have different lifestyles than me right now. You know, like, so it is a bit of a lifestyle move. Like, if I was still running my children for hockey, going to tournaments here, there, and everywhere, I probably wouldn't be driving a Lightning. Actually, I know I wouldn't be because, you know, we would do these long trips and I wouldn't want to have to worry about charging all the time.
Yeah.
But I don't have a lot of experience with the public charging stations either. I've driven one for close to 2 years now, and I've only had to use one a few times because I charge it at night.
Yeah.
So a little bit to do with lifestyle. My son's into motocross. I actually think a Lightning would work great for him because he doesn't have to go that far. But I find it's a bit of a mentality too when with people, you're either for EVs or you're not.
Yeah.
And it's pretty hard to convert somebody, I call them a gearhead, you know, that are right into engines and motors and, you know, and fast things. It's hard to convince them that EV's the route right now.
They just have to get in and try it. And now with that infrastructure you're putting in, I think you're going to have the perfect opportunity for your sales team to actually take people out. They can take them to that level 3 charger. Show them how to use it. Get some of that fear out of it. And that actually leads me into the next topic. Ford is going to be the first to access the Tesla Supercharger network. So I think charging that Lightning on those trips you're mentioning is going to be so much easier in the future.
Sure.
What do you think about Ford getting the first access to superchargers?
Well, that's huge. I mean, range anxiety, as I mentioned, is one of the biggest concerns for people wanting to buy an EV. And once the word gets out that there's a reliable charging network that they can tap into, I mean, Tesla has done a lot of things very well, one of them being their charging network. I don't have any experience with it, but I see them all over.
Yep.
And you can tell that, you know, the uptime on them is great too, right? I guess you would know better.
I think it's about 99.9%. They can actually see on a live grid when something is down, and they send the repair teams right out to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's so reliable.
So I do think that's huge. I guess a little bit of a concern there as there's mass adoption, are there going to be huge lineups? I guess time will tell.
That depends on how they incorporate it in the future. I'm hoping the Blue Oval charging network is going to address some of those issues. Because if you take a Tesla across the country, everything is planned out for you on the GPS. And it's a live planning. So if something changes on your route, it's going to direct you to a different supercharger. So I'm really hoping the Blue Oval charging network incorporates some of that into their GPS units.
They've already started. Like you can do the same on the Ford navigation system and plan your route, and it'll tell you where to stop along the way.
That's perfect. And when they add the supercharger to it, I know they're going to add the best part of it is where you just plug it in and you don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
So driving a Ford is going to be just as easy as driving a Tesla within the next couple of months, I think.
Yeah.
Well, adding on to what you said about performance vehicles, we haven't talked about Hyundai yet, and it's probably one of my favorite brands of EVs. It's actually the reason I work at Hyundai is because of how well built they are. The new Ioniq 5N is coming out. Do you think that's going to convert people over to EV?
So I do. I had the luxury of being able to, as a new dealer, Hyundai brought me to South Korea, and I was able to go to an actual track. And they had professional drivers, and they took us out in the Ioniq 5N, and I was blown away. Like, I thought my Lightning had power.
Yeah.
This thing just throws you against the seat. And then again, the technology in that vehicle, I can see it being a huge halo vehicle for the Hyundai brand. Mm-hmm. Like, if you can ever get people behind the wheel of this vehicle, it's hard to explain. You just have to drive it or be in the vehicle. Like, the power, the handling, and then the technology piece where they can simulate the different sounds.
Yeah. I know they've simulated some gear shifting in there too to get other people really excited about the car.
It really gets your blood boiling when you're going super fast and you get that audio feedback. It sounds gimmicky, but it's so cool.
Yeah, but that's what people wanted in a car. They wanted that feedback, because I know we've gone to electric power steering and people didn't like that. I actually like electric power steering myself. I think it gives just enough feedback. I'm more interested to see the kind of suspension designs they're going to do in that car, because Hyundai EVs are nice, plush, nice vehicles to drive. That 5N is going to be a different animal.
It's phenomenal. We did it on the curves. We did it in straight lines. It's phenomenal for a small heavy vehicle. It handles it's very nimble.
You know,
and as I was in the vehicle, I was thinking the halo effect from like other brands like Subaru, you know, like the WRX editions and all that, like what they've done for that brand. I can see that happening with the Hyundai brand. It's already happening with the N line.
Oh yeah,
the N line and now an EV. I can see where they were going with it.
yeah, me too. I never expected Hyundai to come out of left field with the N line of cars. It's just like the Civic Type R and everything out there. The Elantra N is now like one of the most popular selling sports cars in the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I noticed you went with a flow charger over at the Nissan dealership. I got to say that was an excellent choice. But I wanted to follow up is, one, are there going to be repair contracts to make sure they're always working? And number two, are people going to be able to access these chargers after hours?
Those are two really good questions. So yes, we do plan on having maintenance contracts. I don't see the point in having spent all this money to invest in it and them not working, because I've actually experienced it firsthand. Going to a charger, I stopped at the one down at the en route in the city, and there was 6 chargers there and only 3 of them were operational. And I thought, this is kind of goofy, right? So I understand they need to have maintenance, so I plan on having maintenance contracts on all my chargers. And sorry, what was the second part of the question?
And the second part was, are they going to be available after hours? Because that's a big thing I find with dealerships on PlugShare. I always go across PlugShare and I check, like, do you have 10 stars? Because then you know it's going to work. People have checked in. But the number one thing I see with dealerships is they gate the dealership and you can't access it after hours, which really hurts a lot of people's road trips.
Right. Well, I don't see why we wouldn't share it in the evenings. The level 3 chargers, you know, we do need to recoup our cost to offer the electricity, so we plan on charging for it at a reasonable rate.
Which is what I would expect, because honestly, a free charger is not useful to anybody on a road trip, because a lot of the time you'll find a plug-in hybrid will drop their car there for 10 hours and walk away. Whereas if you charge a modest fee for it, the person who needs to use it can get to it and use it, and then the freeloaders are often somewhere else.
Yeah. Now, we are looking at a couple charging options at Ford that are not your traditional chargers. I think we'll end up, once we get all the information together, we haven't made our final decision on which charger, but there are certain chargers out there that will save the owner money by pulling power off the grid through the evening, and they have their own large battery pack.
That's like what the Shell gas stations are using. That's a excellent technology.
So you can take advantage of the low cost electricity through the night, and then it doesn't require all the big upgrades for your building, because you're using power that's not being used. You know, like if you add a charger to your existing power requirements for the infrastructure of your facility, now my initial costs go up tenfold.
Yeah.
Right. So we're investigating chargers that would pull power through the night. So that would maybe make them not as accessible through the night. But you know, we have other options on the table, and the technology is evolving. So we're going to make a decision on that in the coming months.
That's excellent. I'd love to hear that. That's the kind of technology we need going forward, is a smart grid that can take advantage of that offload power at night. You know, the power that's really cheap.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on to the sales topics right now. And I wanted to know, how are your sales team approaching EVs? Are they actually getting the people to test drive them? Are they enjoying them? What kind of training do we have in place to make sure that they're not shying them away to ICE vehicles in the future?
Well, most OEMs have training programs in place, and some of them like you to pick specialists, which I kind of agree with, because again, they're so different than traditional vehicles in the way that they handle and the way they operate and the actual early adopters are quite a different customer. Now we're working through the early adopters and going into the en masse. But I do think we wouldn't be doing our customers proper service if our sales team wasn't properly trained. So training, like, and update the training. Little things we can do for the salespeople are provide them with demos, to try on an extended time, not just around the block. Like when the first EVs came in, they were like super excited because of the way they drove, and they just drove them really hard, really, really hard, and saw the battery power come down quickly, the range, because of how hard they were driving them. Salespeople are generally fans of what's selling well. So they'll get on board when the demand picks up.
Yeah, which I think is personally hindered by the interest rate right now. Because like if I was to buy my cars right now, I'd be looking at a borrowing cost of around $20,000 because the interest rate is hovering around 8 to 10% now. I'm not sure what it is on the new car side, but I believe when the interest rate comes down, we might see that demand start to pick up again.
Well, and the manufacturers got to keep the assembly lines going, right? So they're starting to come out with incentives. The Machi, they just announced 0.9 financing on it.
That's fantastic. So, that makes a Machi affordable.
Yeah, so that's gonna spur sales, and that's gonna generate some excitement amongst the team. And again, they just need to be trained and ready. And one other thing I'll touch on with EVs is there's apps that we download for the customers so that they can interact with their vehicles. And to me, that's a key ingredient. Like, again, I'm speaking because of my experience with Ford. I know I have Nissan and Hyundai brands too, but I have a lot of experience with Ford. The Ford Pass app has everything you need to know about your vehicle, and like your range, where the chargers are available. You can schedule charging, with the app. Again, the peace of mind when you're driving, you can when I take a longer trip, I can put in my trip, and it'll tell me if I need to charge and where I need to charge it. And I know that in advance. I don't have to wait till I get in the vehicle.
That's perfect. That kind of integration is what we need in electric vehicles. It gives people confidence. Like even in the Hyundai BlueLink app, for example, it shows you how far you can drive, and you can program your trip where it adds the chargers to the trip. That's really
and there's another component to the servicing side. So I get notifications on my app. Hey, there's a recall. Click here to book an appointment. I don't have to lift a finger. I can click it. It schedules an appointment with the local dealer.
That's handy.
So this is the way it's going, and it's going to be. We can deliver a better service to our customers with the technology that it's evolving with.
Very cool. Okay, well, one of your customers that we have an issue with is condo owners and ones who have on-street parking. I know they don't have access to charging, so EVs probably aren't going to be the best solution for them. So we're going to talk about some of the other technologies available out there, like plug-in hybrids and how they're going to fill the gap. And what do you think we can do with condos with level 2 charging?
Well, it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. A lot of condominiums don't have charging built in, the infrastructure for charging.
So we actually have to negotiate with the condo board to see if we can get charging added, which I've seen that done successfully in the past, but every condo board has a different approach to it. Some of them, they put a bank of chargers in that are a charge per use, and you say you have 6 of them and you all share them, which I think works great. It's probably the lowest cost of infrastructure you can put in. And then other ones, they'll actually make the homeowner pay for their specific spot, and you're looking at about $3,000 for that in most cases.
I do think the government needs to be involved, in my opinion, for this to work, because I don't see it working otherwise. Like right now, with the shortage of housing, the condos are already mostly full, right? So what is the incentive for the owner to add charging stations if they even can?
Yeah, exactly, because a lot of condo boards still won't allow them. So you're right, I think they might need laws put in place that say condo boards have to be accommodating for people willing to buy EVs, especially with the mandate. That also talks about the infrastructure needing repair contracts. I think public infrastructure, they keep giving them money to put the units in, but they don't give them a law that says you have to repair these units. In fact, in the Mallory Town en route, like you were mentioning, the 3 chargers were down. The Mallorytown one has been down for over a year, as you'll see in some of my other videos. We went to that one twice, and it still hasn't been fixed.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So, I mean, I know it's great that the government is trying to steer us towards a greener future with EVs, but there needs to be more thought put into practical applications, and I do think condominiums, with intensification of housing is that problem's not going to go away without government intervention and assistance.
Yeah. Which I think is where plug-in hybrids are going to come in handy, because you can just use a 120 volt outlet to top them up, and you don't need it when you run out. You can always just run on that gas engine.
Yeah.
And there will be a very large greenhouse gas reduction by driving hybrids and plug-in hybrids, because you take an engine that's only 20% efficient, which has been my biggest gripe about gas-powered vehicles. Is for decades you've only been able to get 20% of that energy out of the fuel that you put into it. You make it a hybrid, you can get 30-40% out of it. A plug-in hybrid, you can make it almost 60% efficient. So I think these are great technologies that we can use to bridge the gap.
I think it's a win-win if they were to go to plug-in hybrids, at least in the interim for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
To get us until the technology's better on EVs. When I say better, just longer range and the cost comes down.
Yeah.
But plug-ins, it's a win-win for the environment, for the customer, for dealerships. It's a win-win-win.
So one of the interesting things I found with people looking to buy an EV for the first time, they don't know anything about it. So a lot of people actually Google fast charger near me, because they want to find out what the infrastructure is like. I think that's really going to help your business selling EVs, because you have that infrastructure on site. So number one, if they already drive a plug-in hybrid or an electric and they're coming in to see a car, they know they're going to be able to get home because you have that infrastructure there. And those people Googling that term, fast charger near me, you're already going to have that infrastructure in place, so they know they'll be able to get around. The irony is that customers never going to use that charger in their own town, but it is something that helps to sell it. So what do you think about that?
Well, that's good to know. I didn't actually know that. I think most people don't understand that the majority of their charging would be at home.
Yeah.
So that would be, it's just based on what we know now, right? Like, as when we drive a gas-powered vehicle, we want to know where the gas stations are.
Exactly.
You wouldn't buy a gas vehicle if there was no gas stations in your town, right? So it's a logical progression. So that's good to know. That would spur initial interest and demand. But I think as consumers become more educated on what you actually need, it's nice to have a fast charger. I don't think it's necessary. It's nice to know that we're in that conversation.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think home charging is the way forward.
That, and even level 2 charging when you're out and about. I know when I go down to Toronto, I look at parking lots and such that have level 2 chargers, and then I never need to think about charging on the way home, especially if we've gone over 400 kilometers in the one day. In fact, my wife has only used a fast charger once in 5 years.
Oh, wow.
She went to Oshawa recently and was actually able to charge up on the way home. It was the only time she's ever had to use it. So I know it gives people peace of mind, but most of the time, you don't need it.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so we're going to talk about one more technology on the table, hydrogen. It's a weird topic because, one, there's no infrastructure. In fact, in California, they're actually starting to remove some of it. But I don't see the heavy trucking industry moving forward without hydrogen, or even shipping cars and everything across the continents, across the ocean. So what do you think about hydrogen technology for the future?
Well, I'll be right up front. I don't know a lot about it, other than what I think I know about it is it's probably the cleanest option, from, like start to finish. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I think you mentioned to me a lot of the hydrogen that we capture right now is from dirty industries.
It's
right?
very dirty. I believe they crack it from natural gas right now. So the gas companies are trying to keep their hand in the pot by delivering hydrogen that way. But that means they have to compress it, put it in a truck, deliver it to the stations, compress it again. There's a lot of losses in that process.
Yeah.
When we talk about smart grids, I think that's where hydrogen is really going to come into play. So if you can use that baseload power at night and have those generators using that baseload power at night, compressing it on site, that'll probably be the way forward when it comes to hydrogen, not using the dirty hydrogen that we do now.
I understand storing hydrogen can be a challenge, the cost involved. But again, I also understand that it's very similar to filling up your gas-powered vehicle, where it's just like a pump that you can do it fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Right. So there are definitely a lot of benefits to going with hydrogen. but I guess time will tell if that technology becomes adopted.
Although if you think a fast charger is expensive to put in, a hydrogen fueling station is a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually Hyundai's got a pretty good concept with that. They got the N74, and I believe even pickup trucks could move this way in the future. If you're towing a large trailer with a pickup like the F-150 Lightning, it's not going to go as far as you think it should when you're towing a 9,000-pound trailer. So imagine if you had a plug-in hybrid, if you will, that's a fully electric truck, but it also had a hydrogen fuel cell. So you could go that extra distance that you couldn't with the electric part of it. Wouldn't that be a neat addition?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're coming up to the last topic in this interview. We're going to talk about lower income earners and how they can get into EVs. I've heard rumblings in the industry that Hyundai is going to come out with a more affordable EV, which I think is going to work out really well because the Ioniq 5 started at about 52,000 Canadian. So it was one of the best priced EVs in the market.
So I think the manufacturers are going to take care of that over the next few years. They realize that the current offerings were meant more for the early adopters and the luxury buyers, but as they become more mainstream, or for them to become more mainstream, they need to be more affordable. So I'm hearing it from every manufacturer, Hyundai being one who definitely has the manufacturing power, and even Ford just announced as of a couple of weeks ago, they are going to get back into building small vehicles, but they're going to be EVs, and they need to compete with the Teslas and the BYDs of the world. So they know what they need to do. They just need to deliver on that promise. But in the meantime, EVs are becoming available on trade-in, which still have a lot of life left to them. So used vehicles are a good way to start.
Yeah, it's nice to see those on the used vehicle list because even a friend of mine got a used Kona EV here recently, and she loves that car.
Yeah. And then I also think even with the existing available vehicles, I think they're going to become a lot more affordable over the next year and a half with incentives. Like traditionally we've had low interest rate financing. I mean, the true interest rates are high, but the manufacturer can make a decision to support that model that spur the sales. Like you said with the Machi at 0.9%. Yeah, so they're starting it with Machi. I think you're going to see a lot more of that. At the end of the day, they've put all this money out to build these battery plants, to build these factories, and they need to keep their production lines going. Yeah. So they got to keep them moving. And the dealers aren't going to order them if they already have a whole bunch in stock. So how do you move them? You got to make the deal better. The dealers can only do so much with the margin they have. The manufacturers are starting to come to the table, and I think that's going to spur on the next wave of EV adopters.
Yeah. One of the other selling points you could have with electric vehicles is the fact that they actually have a lower cost of ownership. I was actually just doing some of the Hyundai training, and they used the Kona EV as a starting point. They showed a gas-powered Kona was about $25,000, and an electric Kona was about $43,000. But the irony is, in the end, the Kona EV, despite the fact costing so much more in the beginning, cost 27% less to operate than the gas-powered Kona, despite that huge price difference between the cars. So those affordable EVs are coming to the market. They're already here in some cases, like the Kona EV. And you're right, just check the used market. A lot of people have misconceptions about the cost of driving an EV. I know both mine are paid off now. So that cost of ownership, I'm already seeing it. It costs me pennies to drive places now.
There's actually some really good deals on the used marketplace right now because, and my opinion on that is a lot of people that bought EVs right off the bat because there was a lot of hype around it, but they didn't really research if it worked for them and their lifestyle. So some of those are ending up back on the used vehicle market at quite a reduced price. And we're seeing some really good buys out there on the used market because of that.
Yeah. At the time of this video, I think I've seen Nissan Leafs as low as 17 grand if you're looking for a short range EV, of course. I wouldn't suggest that as your first EV if you're expecting to get across the country in it. But if you look for your longer range EVs, I think you're pushing 25 to 35 grand. You can get something really good in the used market. Yeah. Okay, well, I think that brings us to the end of this video. I really appreciated having you on the channel, and I look forward to talking with you again soon.
Okay, thank you.
And everybody,
appreciate you having me.
Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Send us some comments. Honestly, we got to find out, what did you think of this process? This is the first interview we've done on this channel. Leave your comments down below. Ask the questions. I'm sure I can get Adam here again to answer any of your questions. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks for watching.